Long ago, in a village cradled by the wild beauty of hills and forests, the village of Umuduru thrived. Its heart pulsed to the rhythm of drums, harvest chants, and the mighty River Nkwa, a living spirit whose waters held the memory of generations. In this village lived Isiok, a tall, sinewy man with hands hardened by years of climbing palm trees and soul softened by the loss of his first wife. Her name was Ijeoma, and her beauty was only rivaled by the light in her laughter. She had died bringing forth their son, Obinna, whose name meant father's heart. Isiok poured all his love into raising the boy. Obinna grew like a tree after rain, quick to smile, curious, and respectful. The villagers adored him, and many whispered that he would one day be a great man. But time, as it always does, brought change. Isiok remarried. Her name was Adaku, a woman from a distant town, with skin like polished bronze and eyes that sparkled like jewels, but they hid shadows deeper than the forest. She walked with the grace of a cat, then her voice could melt even the hardest resolve. To outsiders, she was the perfect wife. But behind closed doors, she was a storm. Adiku loved only two things, luxury and praise. She wore coral beads even to fetch water, demanded goat meat for breakfast, and spent hours admiring herself in polished brass mirrors. But her lavishness came at a price, one she expected Isiok to pay. "I need more wrappers," she would complain. "How can the wife of Umuduru's finest pomtapa dress like a servant?" Adeku, Isiok would reply calmly, "We must think of Obinna's schooling. The harvest was poor this year." Each time he said no, her rage festered. Obinna, innocent and cheerful, often greeted her with joy, offering her firewood or water. But she would turn her face, muttering, "You little parasite." Her hatred grew with every coin Isiok spent on his son instead of her desires. Then came the day that changed everything. The sun rose blood-red, and the air felt strange, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. That morning, Isiok refused Adiku again. He had earned a good sum from selling aged palm wine, but he gave most of it to the village teacher to secure Obinna's education. When Adeku found out, she snapped. "So he chooses the bastard over me," she spat into the dust. "Let him see how it feels to lose what he loves." That night, she was unnaturally sweet. "Obinna," she said, her voice like honey laced with poison, "tomorrow, we shall fetch herbs by the river. I will teach you the plants your mother knew." Obinna's heart leapt with joy. She had never spoken kindly to him before. The next morning, the mist clung to the ground like whispers from the ancestors. They walked in silence to the river. The forest birds called warnings that Obinna did not understand. The River Nkwa shimmered ahead, wide and slow, whispering stories to itself. "Lean close, my son," she said, "see that leaf with the red veins." Obinna leaned. Her hand moved too fast. A shove. A splash. The river swallowed his scream. She stood above, watching the bubbles rise. "Tell your father I went to the market," she whispered coldly and turned away. But the River Nkwa was ancient. It had seen kings rise and tyrants fall. It carried the tears of wronged children and the songs of forgotten gods. It did not forget. That night, far downstream, a hunter named Okafor was tracking a wounded antelope. The moon cast silver paths through the trees, and his ears were sharp. Suddenly, he heard it, a faint cry, barely louder than the rustle of leaves. He followed the sound to the river's edge, where a small hand gripped a tree root. With strong arms, he pulled Obinna from the water. The boy was cold, shivering, but alive. "Who did this?" Okafor asked, wrapping him in his cloak. Obinna's lips trembled. "My stepmother, she pushed me." Okafor's eyes darkened like a storm cloud. The next morning, the village gathered at the sound of the hunter's horn. All eyes turned as Okafor entered the square, carrying Obinna wrapped in his cloak like a newborn. Gasps echoed. Adeku dropped her basket, eyes wide. "Adeku," Okafor's voice rang, "do you deny this boy is Obinna?" She stuttered, "I thought he ran off. He followed a goat." "You lied," the boy said quietly. "You pushed me." Isiok fell to his knees, tears pouring from his eyes. The village elder stepped forward, holding his staff high. "The river has spoken. Adeku, you are no longer welcome here. Go. Leave Umuduru. Never return." She screamed and pleaded, but the villagers turned their backs. Even the birds refused to sing for her. Some say she wandered into the forbidden forest, where spirits with twisted faces dwell. Others believe she tried to cross the river again, and it pulled her under. Obinna was adopted by Okafor, who taught him the ways of the forest, the path of the hunter, and the wisdom of patience. Years later, Obinna returned to Umuduru as a man, strong, fair, and wise. He became the village chief and ruled with justice, always listening closely when the river whispered. Because he knew the river never lies.